And with that, I'm gonna introduce Brendan Metzler here and Tony Macri, and they're gonna lead this session. Obviously these guys are on our national team, and they are also children's examiners as well as snowboard examiners in their divisions. So we're gonna leave it to them to take it from here.
Awesome. I see by the amount of energy drinks and water bottles that we're all hanging on, and that's awesome. So thank you guys for coming and joining us on the final day. And yeah, Tony and I are excited to be here talking about this subject because the theme of Interski is future snow sports. We were thinking as a team, like, what's going on in our country, what's going on in the snowboard side that really fits right into the future snow sports theme. It came down to little kids snowboarding. It's becoming a reality. It's something that we're particularly excited about, and it's relatively new. It's a newer trend. And simply put, right now is the best time there's ever been to be a young snowboarder. And what an exciting thing for us as an industry, because if we are here trying to push forward and build momentum and build numbers, if we do right by this next generation of young shredders, our future is bright. Sure, there's still work to be done, stuff is still new, but our theory is this, that now is the best time, our belief is this, now is the best time to be a young snowboarder, and that this is gonna have impacts into the future. And simply put, there's 3 reasons and 3 supports for that reality of young kids being able to snowboard. The first is kid-friendly technology. This week we saw the Riglet park. Yesterday Stefan was showing us other technologies, softer flexing hard goods, more child-appealing outer layers. The technology, as the industry started to look at this younger group as having potential to support our sport, has become more kid-friendly. And that's essential for this boom in young snowboarding that we're experiencing in the United States. The second is children's terrain and experiences. Kids' adventure zones have given way to snowboard-specific Riglet parks and terrain sculpted areas and indoor facilities that are designed for our little shredders. And this complements the kid-friendly technology that we have on snow and indoors. But really the piece that brings it all together and that we feel really kind of makes the magic is that human development-driven teaching. Sure, it's great to put kids in gear that they think looks cool, that they can use, that fits their physiology. It's fun to put them in the Riglet park because it looks like a playground, and that's awesome, and things will happen. And yet, going from good to great requires instructors across our country to understand how humans develop, and in particular the littles where development is happening so quickly. And when these 3 factors come together, that's really what's going to push this next generation forward and what we have seen to start to push our younger kids into more successful snowboard experiences. So that, we'll look at a quick video that Burton and AASI put out about a year ago here.
The first wave of snowboarders are at an age where they've got their own kids.
For a lot of years we snowboarded together, and then we wanted to make sure that that was a part of our families.
Burton's worked really hard saying, okay, we can focus on these little guys and girls that want to stand sideways.
Snowboard.
AASI, it's coming up on its 20-year anniversary. Over the last 20 years, I think the most exciting thing working with Burton Learn to Ride as well as all of our national team members is that we've brought together the curriculum, the equipment, and the terrain to make the perfect learning environment.
The opportunity to start snowboarding at a young age is something that's becoming more common. So we made a decision to start snowboarding at the same age as skiing.
Burton, being a manufacturer, decided, well, let's make products that make it easier for people to learn.
I started snowboarding when I was 2. Apparently they make snowboards at that small.
Our coaches effectively can get the kids sliding in no time. Kids can get out there and have a go from day one.
Finally have gotten the equipment to where it needs to be to get people into the sport at a young age. We also have developed the right terrain so that it welcomes kids into the sport.
The Riglet Park was born, making that sculpted terrain into a playground.
They can start as young as 3 years old. They're able to manipulate that board and have that opportunity to be really successful.
You can learn through play, getting to know the equipment, getting to know the snow surface, and falling in love with the sport. And because we're having fun, we're snowboarding right.
Having great coaches is everything. We've got some great friendships in PSIA-AASI, and the Aussie coaches come down to help us.
The whole children's specialist track that ASI and PSIA have now is amazing.
We can teach your instructors how to use that equipment, use that terrain to teach kids 3 to 6.
You want to make sure you have an energetic team that is wanting to work with 3 to 6-year-olds. They're going to create those memorable experiences that the kids are going to want to come back to snowboarding time and time again.
If I was talking to a snow sports school director, I would highly recommend starting kids at 3 years old.
Through my entire career, I've really focused on the alpine side of snow sports, and I always thought the best sport to start in was alpine skiing. And as I started to learn more and more about what we should be providing to our 3 to 6-year-old demographic, I started to realize we shouldn't be telling the kids what sport to be choosing.
After you get it, it's really fun.
Now I just go riding almost every weekend with just anybody who will go riding with me.
It's exciting for a lot of us, having taught ourselves, getting out with a 3-year-old and seeing them do things that took us decades to figure out. The potential for our sport is so huge because these kids are learning so young.
Whatever the percentages that you feel your region market mix is in terms of ski to snowboard, you want to apply to the children. And if you don't offer it, then you're potentially shutting the door for 10-20% of the youth market. It's worth the investment.
We can't control the weather. We can't control the economy, but we can control helping to drive new people into the sport, and little kids are that key.
Cool. So, watching that video, how many of you in this room are actually parents? How many of you have some kiddos at home? Awesome. So if you haven't had those interactions, snowboarding yet with your kiddo, and maybe they're really young, probably looking forward to that. But with that, there's also some barriers that we need to be aware of, right? And with those barriers are some of the perceptions that create those barriers. So for that being said, you got the danger and the injury, right? People think snowboarding is so dangerous, and it's a lot of time it's related to, the extreme sport that it is, going out there and kind of doing all the freestyle moves or the really gnarly terrain. So the perception is out there to those parents, particularly those young parents, and that could be a barrier to getting their kiddos started in our sport. Also, the developmental side. When we all first started snowboarding, we were watching those videos even back in the VHS days or the early DVDs, and you watch your snowboard hero, and those heroes were kind of like maybe the more rebellious person, as they're snowboarding, and they're kind of creating that perception that maybe a lot of those young parents don't want their kids to be going down that track. So those are definitely barriers. And then the limited success. A lot of parents back in the day were just skiers. There weren't a lot of snowboard parents back then. So what happened is that they wanted their kids to be able to keep up with them, and they didn't want to spend those first few days or first few experiences hanging out in the flats on a vacation. You go out on a vacation for a week. You don't want to spend your whole time on the beginner hill, watching your kid kind of flop around on the beginner hill. You want to get them going and create some independence so that they can move around and slide around versus you having to pick them up all the time. And then obviously, the tradition of that ski-centric progression, that you got to start here and slowly move one step at a time and build up in that development. Well, we're here to kind of squash that and to kind of say that, hey, there's some better ways, as Stefan pointed out the other day in his presentation, and we're going to show that today. All of those historical perceptions will, again, decrease the value and the participation, which, again, as we know, those are some things that we're definitely dealing with in our sport. So the contemporary reality, right? Kids have always been able to snowboard. Why not get them going early and get them going as soon as possible? And Nick Heron, our CEO of PSIA-AASI, he is a very alpine-centric person. He loves skiing, and he doesn't snowboard much at all. And it was great to see his response to that video and in that. Cool. Obviously, as Brennan was already mentioning, there's got to be some support. If we're going to get the kids going early, there's got to be some support behind that, right? And that starts with the educators and the manufacturers making sure that we get the gear and the equipment just right, and then into the schools. We got to have not only the ski and snowboard schools, but also, as we're going to show you, the actual school systems themselves, getting involved with this and a PE sort of experience as well. But all that needs to create the ideal environment and experience. As we know, the kids in that world, when they're really young, they're taking on the environment, and they're very aware of their environment around them, and that could have a very positive or negative effect depending on how they're introduced to that environment. So that's very important. Cool. So again, some additional context and things to be aware of, right? Markets are flat for snow sports. I don't know if you guys are aware of that in your nations, but obviously our sport hasn't been growing at its rate that it was just only a few years ago. So with that, we're looking at some other opportunities and some areas to increase that market. And that would be, you know, whether it's a bigger proportion of the snowboarding market. Again, not only looking at the teenage to adults, but building that out a little bit younger and also a little bit older as well. But mainly focused in this presentation on that younger portion of the market. And then, as we mentioned, you guys, you know, maybe you guys started snowboarding back when you were young, and now you're having your own kids, and here you are, getting your kiddos into it. So this is something that's very important to us as we move forward. And as we do this, we're here at Interski, and we're looking at kind of 3 different ways to get this going. At this project came around, like Brennan was saying, when we focused on what is the future, right? What are we doing, and what are we going to present at this year's Interski? So with this being said, the team came out a week early and got engaged with some of the local school systems here, which is awesome. We got to go down and meet the kids in their environment, and that is absolutely crucial, right? When they come up here in the cold and a new environment, things are really different for them, and they tend to get shy and shut down and step back. We don't want that. We want them to step forward. So we want to bring the sport to them. So we're going to talk about that, bringing it to the school, and then obviously then bringing it outdoor on snow, and then finally you guys went through the workshop this afternoon with Nick and Amy. Some of you guys might have done that, so that we can explain sort of how that all comes together. And this is the final piece of that. So with that, we'll start with the Burton PE program. This program is only a few years old, so it's still quite new in its infancy, but it started on the East Coast back in the States, right in the Vermont area. Now it's kind of blown up all over the States and kind of all different regions. The idea of this, again, is bringing it to the classroom, right? So this is going and working with the PE teachers at the local schools, and first educating them on the importance of this, and then also with that, also educating the parents that are bringing their kids there. And you're going to see in some of our photos and video that we have, you'll see some parents hanging out along the side of the gym, just watching to see what we're doing with their kiddos. A big piece of this is empowering the children, right, and the process of play. Like, you'll see that there is not a ton of instruction that's happening in this environment, especially indoors. We give them a little bit of guidance, and then they go out and start playing with it and create some of the sensations and feelings that they're gonna feel when they get on snow. Right? Got a little video here that's gonna show you that experience of what we did indoors with the kiddos. So if you guys want the soundtrack, by the way, to that video, we can So I just really quick want to talk to you. So in that setup in the PE there's actually 5 different stations that happen there. So the first station that you're going to go through is actually, we don't show that much in that video because there's not a lot, it's not very entertaining, but that's where the kids come in and we first fit them up with their snowboard boots. And the reason for that, because we don't want to waste any time on that on snow day. So they're prepped, ready to go. We know their size and we're ready to go, and we're ready for them when they actually get on snow. And then, obviously, we're going to then get the whole crew together and do a bit of a stretch and a warm-up. And that's a big piece with bringing this thing to the school, is that we have to take into consideration the physical education guidelines. And there's a lot of, I'm sure in your nations as well, there's a lot of literature out there to fitness and nutrition with kids and stuff like that. And we want to take that on board as well. It's not just about going and playing, but it's also about physical education. So we definitely do some stretching and things like that with some education behind that when we start out in the morning. And then we go into the 4 different actual snowboard stations, right? This one here is called the spooner board. So in this, you might have seen the kids going nose to tail, making some flexion extension movements and rocking it back and forth. This is a great one to show a lot of core rotation, upper lower body rotation, and getting them moving a lot. A lot of times we'll encourage a little ball play in this one as well, so that they can kind of throw it around, and that gives them a little bit more working on agility and things like that. Again, in these videos you guys saw the kids that we were working with were a little bit older. We've also worked with the younger kids. It's just what we had available to us at the local schools. So yeah, keep it interactive. You know, we generally will go to these schools with the spooner boards and then see what other things we can use, cones, balls, you know, like jumping ropes and stuff like that, some other stuff. The grab mat, you guys might have seen this. Again, this is just a kind of a cool piece to get some culture with the kids, kind of starting to talk about the different names of the grabs and stuff like that. So it's a bit of an interactive game. They throw the dice, and whatever the dice kind of lands on, that's the grab that they have to kind of find on the board, and they're all labeled out and stuff like that. So just kind of playing around with them a little bit. And then there's the foam blocks. So again, like a little snowboard, like a little Riglet board, put it on a foam block. And you can start really working the board laterally, creating some tilt on the board, some lateral movements, and also some flexion extension to create some of that twist as well. And you can do all kinds of things with this one as well. You saw them jumping on, jumping off, and then you can roll the block sideways, get them a little bit higher, and it's a little bit more wobbly. So again, how creative you get, and depending on the level of the kids and the agility, you can kind of take it all over the place. And then this is definitely by far the favorite of the kiddos. They love being pulled around on these ones. This kind of starts getting them into that sensation of having something under their feet sliding, right? You can see there's the throwback boards or the smaller Riglet boards. That's all dependent on the size of the kids you have. You can see the kiddos that are pulling the kids here. We generally start out with the adults pulling the kids, and we'll be really clear with them about some communication, right? Making sure that like it's a 1, 2, 3 pull, versus like otherwise you get the kids pulling the kids and they're just yanking the mat out from under their feet, and then kids end up on their butt. So we want to make sure that we got some good communication going there. Generally we'll set up some cones with this one as well and have them work a little figure 8 through the cones. Cool.
Thanks, Tony, for sure. I think Tony brought up something interesting, which is there's a lot that goes on in that PE program, and he was talking about the movements that we're achieving and kind of the translation to snowboarding. And yet, that's you guys, if you were those 7 to 9-year-olds as we had this week, 7, 8, 9-year-olds, what do you think that indoor PE program looked like to them? You know, because we're using terms like flexion extension and, you know, twist and all these things for this room. This is our facing language, but if you're in this room as a 7, 8, 9-year-old, give me some feedback. What might this look like to you?
Fun.
Fun?
Fun and games.
Fun and games?
Like a playground?
That's the key. The people that actually designed this and worked with Burton used models from playground design. And that's exactly the idea is, yeah, in our world, in our minds, we're like, oh cool, that kid's gonna be able to move along their board. Maybe a little earlier than if they didn't have options within the PE or the Riglet park. They might have more success as they're going down the hill. In their world, it's like, man, I went to this really interesting playground today. And there were some big people there with beards and stuff, and it was kind of strange. But hey, all of a sudden I can snowboard, and that's cool. Another question for the group, maybe a little personal. I'd love a couple people to share their very first memory from this world. doesn't have to be on snow. What's the first thing you can remember?
Going down a slide in the playground.
What do you remember about the slide in the playground?
It was red.
It was red. Awesome. We're going to get back to that. What's someone else's first memory?
I can remember my dad shaving. I think I was looking out of the crib, but I could hear the noise of the shaving.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So just to kind of cue it up, we have color and noise so far. Interesting. Give me one more. I would offer you meat sticks if that helps motivate. I'll tell you mine. I picked up a little coal from the fireplace because it was bright, and I thought it belonged in the fireplace, which it did. And I put it back in the fireplace, and then obviously had some recovery as the ice went on the fingers. But it's interesting because our senses, our sensations, the color red, the noise of the dad shaving, even from a crib, or obviously like the color or the heat or the ice after burning my finger, those anchor memories and those anchored learning. So everything we're doing inside and then out in the Burton Riglet Park, which we saw this week and we've seen around different countries, is grounded in that word sensation. Sensation drives memory, memory drives motivation, and all of a sudden we have the next wave of snowboarding. And yet, it's sensations and skills, and I think that's the key here, is that as we move into the Riglet Park, some of those pieces that Tony brought up, that the kids were learning to flex and extend and rotate and get pulled around and move along a sliding surface, we try to connect those sensations to skills. They don't always have to know that, the kids, but eventually that is the goal with enough time in that Riglet Park and then getting free on the mountain, is that we're balancing those sensations with skills. So with that, prepare yourself for another Dave Schuling soundtrack as we show you the Riglet Park highlight reel. Before we get to this slide, but I'm going to keep it here so we don't have to listen to that music for much longer. Thinking back to our 3 points in this presentation that are supporting our belief that young kids, that little kids can snowboard. It was teaching, terrain, and technology. In that video, and then when you're thinking back to the hill this week, whenever you slid by the Riglet Park, I think we saw most of you, or even this afternoon's clinic, think back to a moment maybe where you saw it, let's start with the positive, where you saw it going well. Consider that moment within that context of technology, like the 180. Let's take the 180 that the kid did 2 days ago. All of us went, yeah, cool, 180. Cool. The technology was right. That kid, relatively proportioned for that board, could move over it, was getting the board to do some action, and figured out that it could flex for him. The terrain, you saw that for him to get over those rollers, he had to try. The terrain was just right for his weight, which I know for some of the kids it wasn't, but he was able to ollie up and over. And then the teaching. The interesting thing about the teaching, which you didn't see in there, the kid was doing 180s on his own, was that he didn't speak a word of English. And I actually worked with this kid, and I forget who it was in this room I worked with this kid on, but both of us, someone from Switzerland actually, we sat down and he was like, oh, he doesn't speak English. And it was a giant game of charades. We actually ended up writing down on like the little Riglet handlebars and showing the 180. And with no common language, just by that sight and the kid having the experience on that board in that setup, that kid went down and threw that 180 and first try landed it. And it was cool because he got the same reaction from the park crew and the bystanders as this room gave him. I guarantee you that kid remembers that. So just kind of keeping those thoughts in mind as we go through is that it really does come down to those 3 points. Some details for you though, on the teaching side of things in the United States, we have a children's specialist pathway. And it has 3 different levels, 2 of which are utilized pretty heavy, and the third one, which is relatively new. We have a product, Children's Specialist 1. This is covering the beginner to the intermediate zone. That's for all ages and all types of development, but really that's just an intro to child development. It's like a mile wide as an exam. It's extremely content rich, but it's pretty low level in terms of depth and knowledge required of our instructors to go through it. And the idea is to get them able to inform their actions when they're working with kids of different ages in that beginner to lower intermediate zone. Certain divisions in our country are utilizing that product as a prereq for some of the certifications. So CS1 is becoming a prereq to take your second level of discipline-specific ski or snowboard cert. And that's based on the demands of our membership and our member schools, because they're seeing great value in their instructors who can come back and handle kids of a variety of ages. It's designed for 3 to 14 years old. Second level, CS2, is all mountain instruction. This is any terrain, anytime, any kid, anywhere. It's pretty intense, has a real thorough workbook, more depth to the knowledge required, still really wide content because it's covering a number of different types of development, all the way through the advanced to expert zone. So instructors are starting to look at kids who might be exceptions to some of the rules and can ride the terrain they don't expect and kind of start breaking some of those barriers that we might put on kids of certain ages. CS2 is a prereq in certain divisions for third level of certification. So before you're going to take your snowboard level 3 in the next couple of years, and before you can currently take your third level of ski certification, you have to have earned CS2 in a couple of divisions in our country. The third one, CS3 / a children's specialist trainer. There's only a couple divisions in our country that have integrated this, but this is for the person who functions in their home resort as a basic trainer, a new hire trainer, training the instructors who have come to the resort, specifically in the kids' world. So it's designed not only to have that breadth of experience in modifying actions across the mountain for kids of different ages, but also how do you train your instructors to be able to do the same. So 3 different levels where we're attacking that teaching end, that teaching skill set. And just big picture here on our children's specialist products, the big constructs that we really lean on, the concepts. Cognitive, affective, and physical development. Those are the cornerstone developments we look at. How a child thinks, how a child regulates their emotion or feels, and again, how do they develop physically. Second one is we have a different teaching model within the kids' world. It's play, drill, adventure, summary. The emphasis on this first word right here, play. Just like it was brought up right here, playground. In the children's world, we're really emphasizing play and sensation. And then moving into more skill acquisition, which we can then take around the mountain. And yet, as we know, ideally for our instructors, and really what we're asking our instructors to do throughout the children's specialist pathway, is not just play without an intent, like, hey, you can be fun, hey, let's go play over here, kids, and maybe you bond with them or something, but playing with intent, playing to develop their skiing, their snowboarding in the children's specialist pathway. So these are the 3 big concepts that we really stand on and from which our national standards are driven across ages and across disciplines. So starting to kind of move into a bit of a summary of a lot that's been said and kind of move through this week. We're in an era of moving from traditional perceptions and thoughts into modern reality of little kids being able to snowboard. Traditionally, young children were asked to fit into snowboarding, whether it was literally into their older siblings' gear or into older kids' lessons, or that they were entering the sport that was more young adult focused. Now, snowboarding is being driven by young children. You saw it. Burton came across the globe to be able to support this concept this week, and they're doing it in a number of our countries. Other brands are as well. Yeah, we have Burton at our disposal, which has been awesome. Other brands are paying attention here. Snowboarding is being driven by this group because of the potential they hold. The traditional mindset, young children must convert into lifelong shredders. Maybe convert from skiers or convert once they're of a certain age, then you can snowboard. You'll be converted into a lifelong shredder. Now, little children, young children are naturally snowboarders. And we're at a time and a place where, thankfully, we're able to embrace them and provide environments where they can meet our sport and our culture. Traditionally, snowboard media was focused again on that teen and young adult group, as Tony alluded to. maybe a little rebellious, a little wild, and not always family or child friendly. And now we're seeing increased content from young snowboarders. It's all over Instagram, it's all over Facebook, the toddlers snowboarding, the 3, 4, 5-year-olds who are unbelievable riders. A lot of our pros in the freestyle world are becoming pros at 13, 14, 15. Guys like Marcus Cleveland, et cetera. Sean White started that movement. So the whole scene is becoming more child-facing. And this is a huge one. It used to be really common, and it still is in certain places in our country, that instructors are trained as adult instructors or kids instructors. I am a kids pro. I'm an adult pro. And what we're seeing start to happen based on demand and on markets and on ski schools responding to trends is instructors are beginning to be trained to teach students of all ages. Maybe you still are going to teach mostly kids, but you are going to be able to ask, you're going to be asked and expected to teach adults as well. Or hey, you might live in the adults world and you should have no problem or hesitation moving down to that children's lineup and taking out a group lesson. And that's really exciting to see across the country. Just a couple personal stories to kind of show why we're so excited about this. This is one of our freestyle examiners and snowboard examiners in the Rocky Mountain Division. This is his 3-year-old son last year, and this is in a backcountry zone about 10 minutes from a road. Yes, a 3-year-old in the backcountry. And the first one I'm gonna have to translate, but this is one of our little friends. But translate this in. He's telling me how to get into my board. He's telling me you have to push on the alligator. He is pumped. He's pumped to be able to strap in and out of his board. His dad's over there jumping off a kicker. He's like, check this out. You slide the alligator in and out, and that's what's going on. It's like, right on, little 3-year-old, and he's able to do it on his own. And I guarantee you the hikers that were coming up this trail didn't expect to see this today on that given day. A little 3-year-old coming out of the backcountry with his dad, their dog, on a family outing. This kid's now a 1.5 years older and is absolutely tearing apart Copper Mountain. And this visual to me is impactful, one, because yeah, it was fun to be up there, and it was this really ridiculous moment of like, a 3-year-old in the backcountry? Like, are you kidding? It goes against a lot of even my context as a children's educator, and yet that is the new reality. And thanks to the technology, thanks to the terrain, and thanks to the teaching paradigm, this reality can become more common. Because we want to end with that same applause that we saw earlier, we searched the internet and found a 5-year-old snowboard video that bent our mind, for sure.
They gon' rock it. Oh, baby, get the rock on the block. It don't matter. It could be always white or black. The fact of the matter, I drop some info. I'm progress the message, the efforts don't stop. I keep on the night, watch the weapon. Try to rhyme in my mind, but all the speakers they ready. Some underhand maneuver, how to find it through ya. The sound of the swing is coming straight from the swamp. London town, punch it down. All sound, boss money coming back to the town. Pull around and chop and shove the people. We cool expose those and roll and evil. To the sound of the siren or the mayday. They say come follow me, but to be frank, I did it my way. Give it up.
So clearly kids can snowboard. So a couple pieces kind of finishing up here. We've had requests for access to content. We like sharing content for all countries. And right now, free access to all of our technical manuals, including children's manuals, discipline-specific manuals, skiing, snowboarding, adaptive, telemark, as well as a teaching snow sports manual, are all going to be available online for how long? 2 weeks? Call it 2 weeks. Get on there in 2 weeks. So please take advantage of that. Yeah, yeah, right, etc. It's about 4:40, so we do have 5 minutes. If there are questions on things we didn't cover or things that you observed this week in our clinics, happy to field those with the team at this point.
I want to say thank you so much to those guys that came up and helped out and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully that was inspiring for you guys to see the kids actually in action and stuff like that. It's difficult sometimes in those super slushy snow conditions, but thank you guys so much for that.
I'm just gonna say, do you guys mix the two together, like skiing and snowboarding, to make them better?
Yeah, you caught me using words interchangeably, and the children's specialist product is multi-sport. I'll tell you that most of them that I lead right now, most children's specialist products, I'm the only snowboarder in the group. That's changing as it becomes a requirement in my division for snowboarders to be there. And you better believe it creates this really interesting dynamic that ends up being a positive, but when people walk in Taos, New Mexico, a very ski-centric mountain, and little freestyle look at me is on a snowboard, they absolutely have a hesitation, and yet there's this exchange of ideas and culture that goes on. So yeah, it's multi-sport, telemark included.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we had one tele, 2 snowboard, and 5 skiers, 4 skiers.
Yep.
I was talking about the kids.
For the kids, oh yeah, so sorry, my apologies,
In
the children's
the
specialist.
park?
Or just like, hey, you can snowboard, let's go skiing, hey, you can ski, let's go snowboarding.
Yeah, like, so I work at Copper Mountain, and actually some of this stuff was started way back in the day. We did some stuff indoors, and right now we've been running at Copper for now, I think it's 15 years, a 3 to 6 year old program, like separate 3 to 6 year old program. And that program is ski and snowboarders together. And the beauty of that is we get them 2 instructors, and you can kind of send and catch and release and stuff like that in our zones. But all that stuff starts indoors. So kids walking around on the carpet with their skis or walking around on the carpet with their snowboards and stuff, and definitely you're starting to see all this stuff that you saw in some of the PE stuff. But kids playing together is absolutely key. And there are absolute times within that program, and we talk to the parents about it all the time. There's times when the kids are like, no, I'd rather ski, no, I'd rather snowboard, and we're happy to swap it, no problem. So that communication goes out to the parents the first thing in the morning. It's about play, it's not about ski or snowboard.
I just want to say, are they developing some kind of softer boots for the skiing kids so they can swap without having to change boots or stuff like that?
There is development on that.
There is, yeah.
It's interesting this week because a lot of questions came up. There are a lot of ski teams visiting the Riglet Park. And the ski side has paid attention to some of the advances that Burton's put out there on the terrain and the technology front. I would say they're a few years behind or a few years out from maybe seeing a full suite of products, but there are absolutely child-friendly skis and ski boots, for sure. Available. Yeah.
What is the length of the courses, the certificate courses?
Yeah, the child specialist one, it is depending on our divisions to evaluate the national standards with their own processes, so it's 1 to 3 days for each of those, depending on where you are in the country. Yeah. 1 to 3 days with a lot of kind of prereq expected work at home, workbooks, etc.
For really young kids, do you find that it's better for their parents to be present or?
Right, the $1 million question. No, I think that most schools that I visit around the United States, most divisions, it's good to have a breaking point where the parents help that transition zone into a new environment. Like Tony was saying, the reason we go to the schools is that's a familiar environment, and it's the same thing at schools. Parents are the familiarity, and then as soon as possible, there's a breaking point so the kids are now present, because as we know, they can be the happiest kid alive, and all of a sudden mom or dad skis by, and it can shift their emotions, so we do separate out parents.
On that, a lot of schools will offer viewing zones where the kids can't see the parents, but the parents can snap photos and things like that and kind of watch over them and stuff. But like we don't, again, that separation piece is key, so we get them engaged with us.
Maybe 1 or 2 more, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just on, I guess like the money side of it, so where I work, it's pretty ski racer dominant and it's pretty resistant to investment, let's put it that way. So, do you have any statistics behind like the return on investment with this sort of stuff, you know, like as far as lesson retention and people continuing to put back into it, because obviously it's a lot of money and it's a big support that you've had with it, which is awesome, but like if I'm trying to convince the people I need to convince to get this done, I need money.
Sure, yeah. You saw in that video, that initial Burton video, I think it was JP Chevalier is a ski school director at a little, pretty small resort called Eldora, and he was talking about the percentages and stuff. And that number and that percentage is really difficult to figure out. It's about where you are as far as what kind of school are you, what kind of resort are you a family-oriented resort, are you not? So that's a little bit difficult. But look at it more percentage-wise, is that, you know, if you look at overall percentage, you're talking about anywhere between 15 to 20% are going to be the young kids, and then the percentage of those kids being able to come back and stay engaged, and the biggest part of that is those young kids. If you offer that initial beginner program to those young kids, the likelihood of getting those kids involved in a weekend program, that's where the money in the chain comes.
I can add something to that as well. We're all instructors, we know progressions, we know build, start small and build up. Where I've seen programs go in, It starts with a promotional event on a weekend, and they build one of these, and there's lines of people. And then the day it's gone, all the parents, let it come from your guest, not from you. The parents go in, they're like, where's that thing? My kid wants to go play in it again. And then start that. So the stepping stone can be to have a small event and then later incorporate it into a product, unless you have the support, the backup to go straight into a product.
So it is 4:45, so out of respect for the other presentations, we need to close this one off. But I guess a thought to close it out. So we came here because we are excited about what's going on in our country with this. This is something we're investing in and that we're seeing out, yet it's still so new and so raw that we're seeking feedback. And it's so raw, to your point, that the statistics aren't even out there yet on retention rate and numbers. The NSAA, our organizing body that looks at ski resort numbers, hasn't even kept statistics for this group yet, because we wanted to come with statistics to this presentation. That's how new and raw this is. So I'd be really excited in 4 years in Finland to see where countries have gone with this, and if we do have some numbers behind this, to see where this trend goes and where we can push it, because it is that new. So thank you very much.